Hi, I'm Stefan, the BMW DIY guy, and I want to show you how you can install the Armaspeed carbon fiber intake into your Mini Cooper. All right guys, so let's jump into this and talk about it a little bit before we do the install. Now, installing an intake like this can have a bunch of different changes for your car. Let's tackle the obvious one first. Adding carbon fiber is cool. It makes your engine bay look a lot neater. It's fun to have your hood up at car shows and other events, and it's definitely something to change the actual aesthetics of what your car looks like. Now, on the performance side of the house, changing your intake can have multiple effects. One of the very first ones is you frequently will change the way your car actually sounds. You'll get a little bit more turbo sound, you'll get a little bit more intake sound depending on the design. You also will get a washable air filter that you can change out and clean every once a year, so you don't have to worry about changing your air filter anymore and get a higher performing air filter. Lastly, you can add a little bit of power potentially in your car depending on your setup, depending on your tune, depending on where your airflow restriction is, but it can make a difference there as well. Change like this is really simple. I want to walk you through it, so let's go ahead and jump into the car and get started. All right, so as we take a look at with the OEM setup here, we're going to be taking the airbox out and these front duct out as well. So you're going to be looking at a series of bolts we're going to take all the way around. And always check the description. I always have what tool sizes and socket sizes you need throughout. But you can even start back here at the back and loosen this hose clamp. You can use a socket if you want, or a Phillips screwdriver, and just get that undone. We're going to be transferring the MAF sensor out. You can start by taking this off, and there's a little depression tab here on the MAF sensor where you depress it and it's going to pull out of the airbox. So go ahead and pull and unplug that. Go ahead and take off the hose clamp here at the back, and then we're going to walk and take all the rest of the intakes out. So let me get that started and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, y'all, so go ahead and pull 1, 2, 3, and they're all 10 millimeter. And then will actually loosen up the box and the front air duct. Once you get these front two off, you just fit it up and out, and you can see it comes away from a series of grooves and it's loose. So we're just going to take this and set it aside. I've also loosened up the air pipe in the back by just backing it off with the hose clamp. Now, with your MAF sensor, and I wanted to show this, there's a little gray clip, which is pretty common for these. It's a little locking clip. You have to, but it's hard to see underneath. You need to pull it back and to unlock it. And if this has never been off before, it's pretty stiff. So you probably want to hang on to the airbox and then just gently walk this to get this off. You really don't want to crank on this. It'll be a problem if you break it. And breaking this plug really sucks, so don't do it. Okay, so now the front intake is off, the airbox is loose of the pipe in the back, and then it's just sitting on rubber grommets down below that you just walk up and off. You also will have a wire bundle right here on this little rubber foot that comes up off the post. But at that point, as you can see, the entire airbox is off. Okay, so let's go ahead and get set and get started with the new one. All right, so here's the new intake, and like I said, it looks absolutely fantastic. You have a whole series of bolts around the outside, and these are 2.5 millimeter Allen. So I've got a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench. We're gonna go through and we're gonna loosen up everything to basically take this cover off, this top cover off, because this bottom piece is gonna go in first. So you can see where it has all kinds of posts, and we've got some grommets that we're gonna transfer from the existing OEM pieces, but we've gotta get this separate first so we can lay this in. So go ahead and walk around the outside, very carefully take all of these out and set the carbon fiber top aside. So here's the lower section that I was telling you about. Now, one thing that's important to note, so there's really only 3 screws that keeps this top cover on. One here, and one on the inside. Now, you'll notice when you take this one off that there's a bracket right here as well that's going to come off with it. That's okay, and we're going to install the bracket back on when we get this set down into place. Now, the other things I want to point out is you notice that there's 2 big preset feet, and you'll look down here, so here and here, you've got big, in this case, white rubber grommets that these feet fit into, so these are going to fit into the existing OEM locations, but you also have a bracket here in the front, and this is one of the ones that we couldn't get to before we took the cover off, which is why we did it. So, with the cover off, you're going to want to go back to your OEM intake, and if you'll notice, there's a rubber grommet right here in the center of your OEM intake, and you just press on it, and then this grommet will come out. You're going to want to transfer this grommet into the bracket of this new lower section right here. So just work the rubber feet in until the grommet fits in, and you just transfer it. Once that's in, you can just take it, fit it underneath the cabling, get those feet down into place, And obviously I don't have the grommet on yet, but the grommet will go over the center post right here in the front, and then this lower section is going to be down and in place, and it's going to be good to go. Now I mentioned this other bracket here off on this side. We're going to deal with that one in a second, because the 10mm bolt that goes in right here, you could potentially put in now and put that bracket into place, which is probably what we're going to do. Is it's going to be loose because the bolt back here into the rest of the intake isn't going to go in until we've got the filter on and the rest of the setup done, because the cover is going to go back on. Okay, so we're going to do this a piece at a time. So go ahead and get this lower section in, transfer this grommet, and then we're going to work to get the new filter and intake pipe in. All right, y'all, so now as I've pulled all the rest of my pieces over, I'm going to walk you through what we're going to do. This lower section is in, as we talked about a second ago. I've gone ahead and I've put the 10mm nut back here on this one bracket that comes up. There's also the 10mm bolt here over on this side, which is just loose right now, because I want to be able to have a little bit of flexibility on this bracket when I'm all done and tying it together and I put the cover on and put that bolt in. I want to make sure I've got room to move, right? So, but what we want to do in the interim, now you've got your new intake pipe, you have your MAF sensor. We talked about this a few minutes ago. It only goes in one orientation. Now the OEM bolts, which were really made to go into plastic, you can set aside, you're not going to reuse them. It has 1.5mm Allens, so make sure you have a small Allen available. It only goes in one orientation, which is great, so you don't have to worry about which direction your MAF goes in. It only goes in one way to match the holes. So go ahead and take the bolts out, put your MAF in gently, and snug it down. Doesn't have to be super tight, just tight enough, and the rubber gasket around it will hold into place. Now I've also grabbed my air filter as well, because this is our new air filter, and you've got your hose clamp. Now what I've done, instead of using a screwdriver on these, you can also use a 7mm socket, and I've got a 7mm socket on a driver. And this is where we're going to start to piece all of this together, because when you look at your top cover and you've got one more gasket, or excuse me, one more grommet that you've transferred from your OEM intake here onto your top cover, you can see the orientation that this is going to go in. So we're actually going to put the pipe in first. So just slide your pipe through. It's going to be this orientation when it's in the car. And I'll just kind of set it here for a second so you can see. That's the orientation it's going to be in when it's in the car. But when it's set up like this, you can flip it around, and this is where we're going to install our air filter. Okay, so all you need to do, and I'm holding it all in place right now, but you're going to take your air filter and just fit it in. So as you can see, because of the size and shape of the MAF sensor, you can't put this on and then slide it through. It's not going to fit through all the grommets. So you have to put the pipe through and then the air filter on as well. You can use that 7mm socket to tighten down your air filter. Once that's all in, we're going to take it and we're going to flip it over and we're going to fit it back into the car. But you're almost done. Okay, so go ahead and get this all put together, and then we're going to start to fit this back into place. All right, so it's all together, as you can see, and this really is an easier way of doing this instead of trying to put the cover in place and fit this all into place and dealing with that, trying to reach underneath and get it in firmly. Now, keep in mind, you only have a short length of pipe right here, so you need to make sure that the filter is on really square to the pipe, and then tighten down your hose clamp. Now, one thing to keep in mind, you don't want to apply too much pressure. You want to find the exact amount of pressure to put this on so the filter stays in place, it doesn't come off, it has a nice seal. But if you crank down on it too hard, if you just turned, or use something like an impact wrench or something to tighten that down, you could potentially crack the carbon, which would really suck. So don't do that, right? So make sure that this is in a good place, and as you can see, the pipe moves within the grommet through the cover. Now, the other thing that I've done is I've gone ahead and transferred the other grommet off the OEM intake, so here for the corner. So as we flip this over, you can see where this is going to start to fit into place. So now it's a matter of just putting it down into place. And it's going to take a little bit of fitment, a little bit of wiggle, because the filter has to fit into the shape here in the bottom pan, but that's okay. So what you're going to do is just take your intake pipe, lift it up, fit the new pipe in, and then just walk the cover down into place. And it's going to take a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of fitment, as you can see, as this is my first attempt in putting it on, so you can see this kind of live, right? As it fits around all of the rest of that lower assembly, it all kind of fits all down into place. And then you also have this grommet on this far corner over here. It's a little bit hard to see on the camera, I know right now, but also here, that's going to go over the top of that post like that. That's going to fit it all in. Now, cover's down, but it's not sealed around the bottom quite right, and this bracket is still not on quite right, but as you can see how it's all fitting in now. So now it all just comes down to fitment. As you walk this cover down and get it to fit into place nicely, because remember, you've got your 2 screws, 1, 2, and you've got the one on the inside here that you're going to need to put into place. All right, so the cover's in place, as you can see, and it really is, you fit the cover into place and then you fit the intake pipe down onto the plastic intake with its hose clamp. And again, you can use a screwdriver or 7mm socket to tighten that down. Don't forget your MAF sensor. You're just gonna take that, fit it down into place, and it should click, which hopefully you heard. So that should click into place. Now, this doesn't have that same post on it for your hose, this hose retention, but this is kind of a rubber sort of grommet bracket, so I just turned it at it so the hose won't rub up against the new carbon fiber. Okay, but at this point, just double check everything. So you've got your 10mm here. Now you've covered up the other 10 that's right here, so that should be down and tight, but both of those should be down tight. Your 10mm over here should be tight now as well. You've put in all 3 screws here, here, and here, so the cover's good. Your intake pipe is good. You know that your air filter is good already because we put the cover on, okay? And then this is also snug tight as well. Don't over tighten it and crack your carbon fiber, like I mentioned. Okay, double check your MAF sensor, which you should have already done, but it should be good to go. And your MAF sensor's clicked into place, okay? Other than that, you're pretty much done. As you can tell, this really isn't a hard install. It's pretty straightforward. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, the very first improvements from the visual place, and this carbon fiber looks absolutely fantastic. Okay, so the last thing you want to do is fire your car up, make sure that everything is run so you don't have any error messages or any problems, and you're all good to go. All right, guys, so all done. And as you can tell, this really is a simple project and only takes a few simple tools. So a quick reminder, everything you need from part numbers to links to tools and everything else is listed in the video description below, so make sure to check that out. While you're there, please make sure to click subscribe and the little alarm bell. It makes a huge difference to my channel, and I have a ton of content coming. Mini Cooper, BMW, maybe even more, we'll see. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you on my next video.